leadership often gets boxed into this whole executive tasks or HR stuff category. But the reality is that good leadership, it's not a luxury. It's the difference between teams that coast and teams that transform. So Rudy Miick, good friend of mine, Rudy Miick has spent literally decades coaching and developing leaders across industries, helping them bridge from managers doing tasks to leaders, creating culture, clarity, momentum. So in this episode, we're peeling back the layers, what leadership really means, how to build teams that follow willingly, and how your decisions today shape the organization you become tomorrow. So with that, I welcome my guest, Rudy Miick. Rudy, it's great to have you, man.
Paul, it is great to be here, buddy. And what a lead in, man. You hit it right on the nose, right?
Well, thank you.
Tasks versus transformation. Wow.
Tasks versus transformation. That's kind of a good segue into the first thing I want to talk to you about. But before we even get there, let's just acknowledge that I just want to say, Rudy and I host another podcast from time to time together called Restaurant Masterminds.
Yeah.
And that's with Paul Barron on his Savor Network. So if you want to see us on another podcast, go to Restaurant Masterminds. And it's actually, I think that that podcast now has almost 300,000 subscribers, which is pretty phenomenal. So Rudy, it's kind of cool for us to be doing this solo without Dad, Paul Barron, watching us.
Well, it's great to be on with you. And, we just keep building on the momentum, right? And the opportunity with you and the others on our team that in masterminds, right, to drive 300,000 plus views, and everything you've done, I'm doing out there. And here we are. So yeah, whether it's untethered or connected somehow, metaphorically, I'm all good with that, and metaphysically as well.
Metaphysically, metaphorically, let's transcend space and time together.
There you go. There you go.
So tell me, how did you arrive at this work of leadership development? What were some of these formative experiences that shaped your philosophy around leaders and leadership training?
Gosh, as I look back on what has now been a really long career, it just seems like there's a straight line from the beginning to now. And
Yeah.
the act of the cliche around managing tasks, right? Managers manage things, leaders lead people, right? So if that's true, and I don't think life is quite that clean.
Yeah.
But the process of, I was always one of those kids that, as a young kid, I was one of those kids that kept kind of rising to the top. What I consistently was one of the kids that had a voice, and not just because I was loud, but there was always a conversation happening about, well, what should we do next? Or what do we do now, right? Now that this is accomplished. And whether it was athletics, or I have a long background in athletics and also in music, and that's where this really started, I think, my journey. And then as a young kid, actually, my dad owned ice cream stores, and it was so blue collar. We literally had a curtain between our living quarters and the store. And by the time I was 6, I was serving guests, right? Good old family labor law, right? And
by the time you were 6?
At 6 years old, this is dating me, but 6 years old, ice cream, 18% butter fat ice cream. It was so good. Oh my God.
Yeah.
was a nickel a scoop. And at 6, I was taught by then to make change for $1. And we could do 5 scoops on a cone for a
Yep.
quarter, right? And give back change. And literally by the time I was 6, I knew the ice cream variations, I knew the recipes on it, in broad terms.
Right.
And my dad was smart enough to send a 6-year-old kid out behind the counter to say, "Hi, can I help you? What kind of ice cream would you like today?" Right? As
Right.
opposed to an open-ended thing. And literally, it started there. And the whole concept of, if it's clean, if it's polite, please, thank you, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, thank you,
Right.
and uh, and we have a smile on our face, and the quality of the product is a value, business works. 6 years old, I was already living that world.
You were living what the hospitality promise
Yep.
from jump.
From jump,
It's just an interesting
right?
note. I, I was thinking about this the other day. Um, you just described to me your father's business and the fact that back then he's selling basically 25-cent ice cream cones, and yet do you have brothers and sisters?
Uh-huh. I had a
That
sister, yeah.
Yet yourself, your sister, your family, here he is with this business. He's able to provide a house, an education, a car, a mortgage, right?
Yep.
Selling
With
dollar.
a core, exactly. You could get
I
4
love
cones
that.
for $1. Right.
I just as a quick aside, my grandfather was a barber in a small town in New England. He was a
Yeah.
barber for 50 some odd years. And
Wow.
I actually have back there's a cash register, an old national. I think you may have even seen this before.
Yep.
And here's this man that, comes home from the war, marries his girlfriend, has 3
Yep.
kids, has the house, the mortgage, and everything. And here as a barber for 50 years, never accepting a credit card.
Yep. Yep.
And it's just, I digress, but
Well,
I love the fact that that's the way you were kind of brought into learning how to communicate with people.
well, and so that service story, and
Yeah.
the process of understanding the story behind the ice cream, right? As a little tiny kid, right? And then the story progresses to that same sort of work ethic and process of job isn't done until it's done, and you only do your best. There's nothing less than that.
Right.
That bled right over into sports, and then music, and vice versa. And the process there, this is also the next segue back to your question about leadership,
Hmm.
was the next big life experience was the only way to get to Carnegie Hall, that old joke, is practice, right? Practice, practice, practice. And then if you're serious, you practice to be the best. And so there's practice, then there's performance. Here's our restaurant, or here's our tech stack, set it up, turn it on,
Right.
right? Work on it, fine tune it, get it better and better, tighter, tighter. That's the performance. We shut down. The next thing we do is post performance, post production, and figure out what do we tweak for tomorrow to be better. And that piece is we are in the restaurant business performers before and everything.
So, one of the things that I picked up on from you over, uh, maybe it was last year or the year before that, but I remember you mentioning something once about leadership by default versus leadership by design. And, so you talk about leaders often being by default rather than intentionally leading.
Yeah.
What's the difference and why does it matter so much for a growing organization? Particularly like, our audience is predominantly emerging technology in this space.
Yeah.
So how can they transform from, leading by default as opposed to intention?
Well, so
Okay.
here's an interesting piece is we may have a manager or an owner that is by default the leader, right? So
Hmm.
here again, actually by design, by title, they are the leader. However, one of the staff ends up being by default a leader. They're a team member. They don't have the title. We don't, again, name the activity, sports, music, performance, whatever it might be. I may just be an hourly worker, but my teammates defer to me as a leader. And that is, in many respects, the default leadership. And oftentimes, if the owners, managers are being more cops than inspiration, we start building a bunch of drama. And guess who the actual leaders are the ones that are in the background going, hey, dude, this isn't right. You don't have to treat us this way. Right.
Right.
You can treat us with respect. Right. So that the process of leaders by default, we better pay attention to. There is that intrinsic piece, right? That leadership just exudes out of somebody. And
Right.
so that now the story gets a little more complex. Any one of us can turn into that leader at any given moment. We get pressed enough, we get pushed enough, we get squeezed enough, somebody's going to stand up and say, whoa, wait, right?
Right.
Now, the flip of this is that managers, and I think this was actually the context of our dialogue a couple of years ago, managers in restaurants, especially, this is notorious, right?
Hmm.
Managers by default are the leaders. They
Yes.
don't have the title of the leader. So that's leadership at a next level is I'm barely taught. This is one of the things we really have to work on in our industry. Most managers are barely taught to manage
Right.
and they're by default leaders. So are they inspiring or are they cops? Go ahead. You're going to say,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it's for many people believe that what you're describing right there is a root cause of so much of the strife in our industry, based on the fact that retention
yep,
is terrible.
yep,
To
yep,
put it mildly.
yep,
Working in restaurants, has one of the highest turnover rates, outside of any industry in the world.
yep,
And so training, turning these default leaders, these managers that have been hired to be managers, maybe because they're, for whatever reason, they showed something that they can
right.
manage. But what the industry desperately needs is that leadership training, so that way they can be inspiring, because
E-
that way the people that are below them want to keep coming to work,
exactly.
find a role model.
Well, and in our work, ironic to exactly what you're saying, where our turnover in the industry is 100% plus, oftentimes 185, 190% turnover,
Yeah.
right? Per annum. In one quarter, Paul, we typically will turn in our projects, we'll turn that sort of turnover down to 80% retention,
Wow.
180% turnover to 20% turnover in one quarter, simply by the way we communicate and the way we inspire and get to clarity instead of demanding, right? Or catching people doing stuff wrong.
Yeah, I think that is so critically important. Again, we keep seeing, and I think we talked a little about this a little bit before we went on air. Um, this idea of hospitality. We're all trying to get back to the basics here, right?
Yeah.
We the hospitality industry needs to be in the hospitality business, which means that There's a difference, and I think Danny Meyer put it best in his book. There's a difference between service and
Yep.
hospitality. And
Mhm.
I think so much of the restaurant industry is looking more at the service and the efficiencies
Mhm.
as opposed to the human aspect of acknowledgement, inspiration, and the hospitality.
Well, there is this given, whether it's Danny Meyer, who certainly coined the term hospitality, and then Will Guidara in his new book and, his recent book. uh, Their hospitality is this incumbent, intrinsic part of our work. To me, I would take this even one step further, which is the root of the word restaurant. Your listeners, those of them that have heard me on other podcasts or events, one of my favorite questions is, hey, what's the definition of the word restaurant? A place one goes to be restored. What's the definition of restaurateur? A restorer of soul.
Ooh.
So what if our dishwashers, our hosts, our bartenders, our runners, our counter guys, what doesn't our IT team, what
Yeah.
if every one of those touch points we start at, we're restorers of soul. Hospitality just oozes out from that place of, hey, it's not just the food, it's the food with the touch. It's the food with that bourbon you're having a sip of, right?
Oh,
It's,
yes. Thank you for reminding me.
yeah, exactly. And, and the other big headline is that you hear so often, well, God, this is just common sense. It's hospitality. Well,
Right.
it is hospitality, but that is not always common sense.
No, no, it's not. And we all know this actually another good segue because it boils down to the environment for which the restaurant is in. What is the environment like, right? And so
Exactly.
one of the and by the way, for the audience, I need you to check out, just Google Rudy Miick, Miick. You'll get to his website and you'll find out that one of the pillars of Rudy's teachings and methodologies is communication and specifically giving feedback, right?
Yep.
Navigating conflicts, speaking candidly but constructively.
Yep.
So what are some of these common missteps that new managers, leaders
All right.
make, and how do you help them course correct?
God, what a great question, right?
Yeah.
And all of these pieces tie together, Paul. That all these little nuances of hospitality, of restoral of soul, of this isn't common sense. We need to understand what excellence means in our given concept and then train it, right? And so all of those pieces drive the business culture, which drives the brand performance. So the culture, oftentimes, this goes back to management versus leadership.
Hmm.
Managers tend, as soon as I get that title manager, yeah, I might as well put a big badge right over my heart, right? I am now the chief cop, right?
Yeah, you're the
And
or
and
there are other words.
oh my God. And from that management place, the habit typically is find people doing stuff wrong.
Right.
Oh, if we do have, we all talk these days about values or our why and our how and all that stuff. My job as a manager and the cop is to catch you when you're doing it wrong and basically slap your hand. Hey, not that way, right?
Right. Right.
Stop that, right? Our premise, how we go back to retention and turn retention on its ear to
Hmm.
get 80% retention within a quarter, is we do one. Well, we do a bunch of stuff, but through our communication, it's this simple. Wow, I love how you did that. I
Yep.
love how you carried the plate. I love your eye contact. I love this smile on your face that seems authentic. Oh my God, what a great job pre-bussing the table, right? So instead of catching them wrong, we catch them doing stuff right.
Right.
And here's the cool part. I love the way you're carrying this tray to take your performance further. Instead of a flat hand, put it up on your fingertips, right? And there's even more flexibility. So this is what you're doing so well. And to take it even further, do
Right.
that. And
Yes.
people go, God, what else could I do? What else could I do? Right. And the next
You were
thing,
describing you're describing like all the great ways and like how to
ah,
be a good parent.
what
It totally translates. It's like
100%.
how would you give your kid feedback in order for the to you tried everything, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Let's let's so I love that example.
It, it, it's so much fun. And literally, when we're opening a new restaurant, within 3 days, the training process, the team is literally coming up and go, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? And we end up from contact and connection to engagement, right? And
Right.
even is it and excitement about, wow, nobody's actually ever told me
Re-
I was doing
or
something good.
recognize. Yeah, that
Yeah.
there's recognition, right? And I think that, would you say that that also has a like a multiplying effect where where that newfound joy in being complimented and being recognized now transfers into just a better overall experience with the guest?
Well, the short answer is yes. Here's here's even more why. So our business is simple, as complex and nuts as it is, right?
Yep.
It's about the food and beverage, it's about the service, it's about the decor. So is the feel consistent? Is the door handle sticky or is it clean? Is the table wobbly or is it stable? Right? How's the food? How's the beverage? How's the service? Pretty basic.
Yeah.
Here's something that nobody I know except me talks about. There's so the idea when we're drawing up a restaurant, we're working in 2 dimensions and we're sitting here conceptually thinking about our training. 2 dimensions. We build the bar, we build the kitchen, we build the dining room. Now it's in 3 dimensions, right? Back to the wiggly table
Hmm.
or great food. Here's a little secret. There's a fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension is the space between the tables and the space from the tabletop to the ceiling that is the energy and the parting or the connection or the positivity or the negativity. And now we go back full circle to hospitality,
Hmm.
and Danny or Will can build out a $5 million beautiful state of the art, James Beard Michelin restaurant. Or I can have the simplest little, my dad had an ice cream store that literally we had a curtain when I was a kid, right? Between the living quarters, right? That's how simple it was. But the store was pristine, right? It was bulletproof clean. And the fourth dimension, you could feel from the second you walked in the door, right? Whoa. So we might call that vibe. We might call it, any number of stuff, but we can literally manage the fourth dimension and have people captured in hospitality and
Yes.
the energy. And literally, you couple that with great food, great beverage, and great service. There's only one outcome.
Now you,
huge, huge success.
yeah, huge success. And now you are truly restorative. You know, you are
100,
in fact living up to your name and your practice. I
100%.
I love that. All right, I want to switch gears here for a second,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I want to talk about one of the things that I've heard you talk about before, and this is this idea of ambiguity, but specifically decision making in
Yes.
ambiguity. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is that, very often leaders, team leaders, they have to make decisions when data is either incomplete or it's in flux, it's not real time, it's not the data might not even be trusted. So what can leaders do to create frameworks or sort of mental models to make better calls in these ambiguous or uncertain situations?
Yeah. Well, the first part is to mitigate the risk. Our industry is certainly high risk. There's no doubt about it, right? 85% mortality rate. And usually within year two, a 50% year one.
Yeah, and I just
And
to even
yeah,
highlight even further, if
yeah,
you're franchisee, your odds go up a little bit higher because you have a business model. But even that, even as franchisees,
yeah,
half go
yeah,
away.
exactly. 100%. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
So So part of this is now, again, all these pieces tie together. So very quickly, instead of things being common sense, can I, as the owner or the manager, define what excellence means at each touch point, whether it's the tech stack and the IT in the back, the coding, the way the reports are working, when we run them, how often we run them, how our cash handling is, our recipe development, our service delivery, et cetera.
Oh my goodness. So I there was at least another 20 minutes to go with Rudy. And somehow, some way, his amazing internet connection just kind of puttered out. So my sincere apologies, to Rudy and the audience that we cut the interview short there. Rudy is a very wise man, and he will definitely be joining me for another conversation soon. So sorry, everybody, to cut that short, uh, but we'll get him on again soon. Thanks for being a subscriber. Thanks for giving me a like and a thumbs up. Makes me feel good. So I appreciate it, guys. Until next time, ciao.